It's been almost a year since my wedding day, and I still can't look at my husband without feeling like a complete fraud. I love him, I really do. But every time he kisses me, every time he tells me I'm the best thing that ever happened to him, I have to swallow the guilt that's been eating me alive. Because I cheated on him. On our wedding night. And he has no idea why. The debt that started it all. My husband, Nate, comes from money. Not billionaire money, but comfortable money, the kind that means he never had to work a shitty retail job in high school or worry about student loans. I, on the other hand, grew up one missed paycheck away from losing everything. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and my dad, well, he left when I was 12 and never looked back. I spent my 20s clawing my way up, trying to escape the cycle of poverty. I worked my ass off, bartended on weekends, took extra shifts at my office job, and somehow, I still ended up drowning in medical bills after my mom got sick. $38,000. That's how much I owed. I never told Nate. He would have helped me if I'd asked, he's that kind of guy. But I didn't want to be a charity case. I wanted to walk into our marriage as an equal, not as the broke girl he had to rescue. And then he found me. The devil at the bar. 2 months before the wedding, I was working a late shift at the bar when a man slid into a seat across from me. He was well-dressed, older, maybe early 40s. He gave off this unsettling mix of charm and power, the kind of guy who's used to getting what he wants. Right? He said, swirling his whiskey. I should have known right then that something was off. Most customers don't know your name unless they're regulars. But I nodded, forcing a polite smile. You're marrying Nate Calloway, he continued, leaning in just enough to make my skin crawl. Big wedding. Expensive. I didn't say anything. I just kept wiping down the bar, hoping he'd take the hint. Then he said the words that made my blood turn to ice. You owe $38,000. I froze. My stomach twisted into knots. How do you? I make it my business to know things. He smiled, slow and deliberate, like he was enjoying my panic. And I know you don't have that kind of money. I felt sick. He wasn't wrong. I'd been dodging collection calls for months, scraping together whatever I could. But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. I can make your debt disappear, he said, tapping his fingers against the bar. No strings attached. Bullshit. There were always strings. What do you want? I whispered. His eyes met mine, dark and calculating. You. Just once. My stomach dropped. A deal with the devil. I wanted to tell him to go to hell. I wanted to throw his drink in his face, scream at him, something. But all I could think about was my mom, how she was skipping doctor's appointments because I couldn't afford them. How debt collectors were threatening to garnish my wages. How I was about to marry the love of my life and bring him into this mess. I was out of options. So, 2 nights before my wedding, I met him at a hotel. I won't go into details. I can't. I barely remember it. I disassociated so hard I felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. But when it was over, he handed me a slip of paper. Debt's gone, he said, adjusting his cufflinks like this was just another business transaction. Enjoy your honeymoon. And just like that, it was done. The wedding day lie. On the outside, our wedding was perfect. The dress, the vows, the first dance, it was everything I'd dreamed of. And when Nate kissed me, when he looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, I almost let myself believe I could pretend it never happened. But then came the wedding night. Nate was gentle, loving. He touched me like I was precious. And the whole time, I wanted to scream. Because all I could think about was him. Living with the guilt. A year has passed, and I've never told Nate the truth. Our life together is beautiful, he's kind, he makes me laugh, he loves me in a way I never thought I deserved. And yet, every time he holds me, every time he says I'm the best thing that ever happened to him, I feel like I'm suffocating under the weight of what I did. I keep telling myself it was just one night. That it didn't mean anything. That I did it for us. But I know that's a lie. And someday, I think the truth is going to destroy me. At first, I thought I could bury it. Pretend it never happened. I convinced myself that the guilt would fade, that time would smooth over the jagged edges of my betrayal. But guilt doesn't fade. It festers. It started small, little things that Nate probably didn't even notice. I avoided eye contact when he told me he loved me. I flinched when he touched me unexpectedly. I became hyper-aware of my phone, dreading the possibility that he would reach out again, that maybe the deal hadn't been as clean-cut as I thought. I started drinking more. Just a glass of wine at night at first, then 2, then 3. Anything to dull the buzzing in my head, the constant loop of that night playing over and over in my mind. And then, a few months after the wedding, Nate sat across from me at dinner, brow furrowed, eyes full of concern. "Elle, are you okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Of course." "Why?" "You've been different," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His thumb traced slow circles against my skin, the way he always did when he was trying to comfort me. "You barely sleep. You're distant. You don't talk to me like you used to." I forced a smile. "Just stressed from work." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. Because that's who Nate is. He trusts me. He believes in me. And I am betraying him every second I keep my mouth shut. A ghost that won't stay buried. The real nightmare started about 6 months after the wedding. I was walking home from work when I saw him again. At first, I thought I was imagining it. My heart started pounding, and I told myself I was being paranoid. He had no reason to reach out. The debt was cleared, the deal was done. But then he smirked. And I knew. I tried to keep walking, to ignore him, but he stepped into my path like he had all the time in the world. "Mrs. Calloway," he said smoothly, as if we were old friends catching up. "Married life treating you well?" I clenched my fists. "What do you want?" He sighed dramatically, tilting his head like he was amused. Now. Is that any way to greet the man who saved you?" Rage flared in my chest. "You didn't save me. You bought me." His smirk widened. "And yet, here you are, debt-free, living your perfect little life." I swallowed back bile. "We're done. You don't get to talk to me." "Done?" he echoed, feigning disappointment. "Sweetheart, we were never done." My blood ran cold. "What the hell does that mean?" He leaned in, his voice a low whisper that sent ice through my veins. "It means I own you now." I wanted to scream. To punch him. To run. But I stood frozen as he slipped a business card into my hand. "Be ready when I call," he murmured. Wouldn't want Nate to find out how his blushing bride paid off her debts, now would we? And then he was gone. A choice I never wanted to make. I barely remember getting home that night. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly get the key in the lock. Nate was waiting for me in the kitchen, a glass of wine already poured, a warm smile on his face. "Hey, babe," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You okay? You're pale." I wanted to tell him. Right then and there. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness, to tell him everything before he could use it against me. But then I imagined the look on Nate's face. The betrayal. The disgust. The way his whole world would shatter if he knew what I had done. So I swallowed it down. Again. And again. And again. But now, I'm trapped. Because he's going to call. And I don't know what I'll do when he does. I lasted another month. A month of waiting, of jumping every time my phone buzzed, of drowning in anxiety so thick I could barely breathe. I told myself I could figure a way out, that I could outsmart him, that if I just acted normal, I could keep Nate safe. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. And then, one night, my phone rang. It was him. I was in bed next to Nate, his steady breathing the only thing keeping me from completely unraveling. I slipped out of the sheets, phone clutched in my shaking hands, and stepped into the bathroom before answering. Hello? You took your time, he said, his voice smooth, amused. My heart pounded. What do you want? A pause. Then, I have another offer for you. I gripped the sink, my knuckles turning white. No. He chuckled. That's adorable, Elle. You think you have a choice. I closed my eyes. I'm done. I paid my debt. You paid a debt, he corrected. But not the one you owe me now. I swallowed. What the hell does that mean? It means, he said slowly, that I have something you don't want Nate to see. My stomach dropped. Check your email, he continued. I hesitated. Then, with shaking hands, I opened my inbox. There it was. A video file. My vision blurred as I pressed play. And then, pure, cold horror. It was that night. The hotel room. The grainy security footage, angled just enough to see me stepping inside. And then, minutes later, him following. No sound. No details. Just enough to ruin me. You bastard, I choked out. He laughed. Now. Let's keep it civil. Wouldn't want Nate to see this, would we? I felt like I was going to be sick. What do you want? One more night, he said simply. Then we're done. For good. I wanted to scream. To break something. To fight. But I knew the truth. If I didn't do it, he'd send that video to Nate. And I would lose everything. The confession. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. But at some point, the door opened, and Nate was there. Elle? His voice was groggy, confused. What's going on? Why are you crying? I didn't even realize I was. He stepped closer, reaching for me. Baby, talk to me. And just like that, I broke. I told him everything. The debt. The offer. The hotel. The video. All of it. I expected him to rage, to throw me out, to tell me he never wanted to see me again. Instead, he just stood there. Silent. Then, he exhaled. You should have told me. I sobbed. I was scared. I didn't want you to hate me. He took my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were dark, unreadable. I don't hate you, Elle, he said softly. But I do hate that bastard. I swallowed, my throat raw. What do we do? His jaw tightened. We end it. For real this time. The end of the nightmare. The next day, Nate made a call. I don't know who he spoke to. I don't know what was said. All I know is that, a few days later, the man who had ruined my life disappeared. No trace. No threats. No video. Just, gone. And Nate never told me how. All he said was, you never have to worry about him again. I don't ask questions. And I don't think I want to know the answers. Happily ever after? People look at us and see the perfect couple. They see love, success, happiness. They don't see the darkness underneath. They don't see how close I came to losing everything. And they don't see how far Nate was willing to go to make sure I never did. I love him. More than anything. But sometimes, late at night, when he's asleep beside me, I wonder. Did I marry a man? Or did I marry the devil who finally saved me?